just real quick. It is not feasible. It is not possible to expect a child to escape, like physically escape those types of controlled environments. So that's a whole thing. But let's take, 5-year-old me, 8-year-old me in Brazil, or 10-year-old, 14-year-old me in Mexico. Let's pretend, just play along, let's pretend that I was able to like get past the guards and the adults and the dogs and, scale the wall with the glass at the top and get to the other side of the wall, the other side of the compound walls. Then where would I go? Then what would I do? Would it have been safer for me if I could physically escape? Like, let's pretend, but also, rhetorical question, where's the support for survivors? So children escaping those types of things are just not really possible, but also there's not support for survivors coming out of that type of thing. So just imagine that, first of all, you're born and raised under a rock. Let me oversimplify it, right? Hopefully no one can relate, but you're born and raised under a rock, and you're literally told red is blue. And every picture on the wall, every book you read, every video song, like every single influence that you have is not from the outside world. It's, from within the cult, and it all says red is blue, and everyone's saying it. So you're a kid. Why would, that's all you know. But at a certain age, especially if you have a mind like me, you start to question, and you're like, but I feel like red could be red, but what about in this case red? That makes sense. And you're told you can't ask questions. You have to take it by faith. At the beginning of this conversation, I unpacked the 10 rules of every cult, and one of them is you have to take it by faith. God said so, therefore you must. You can't ask questions. So imagine being a child and not only trying to deprogram yourself in order to have the courage and the wherewithal to escape that situation, but the rhetorical question is then where would you go? You don't exist on paper. If every situation can be a little bit different, but like in our case, we didn't have medical records or school records. Like, we did not exist on paper. Our parents are like evil, so it's like a net negative in terms of support. So all that to say, escaping the unimaginable is this whole thing. But then let's talk about what healing would even mean. That church in Florida, sorry. Okay, so let's talk about what does healing even mean? What is actually helpful for survivors of childhood, I'm going to use soft words for the sake of this platform, exploitation and bad things, including trafficking, but different types of actual exploitation, okay? I said earlier, and this is a hard pill to swallow, but I believe that healing is a choice. I believe you're the only one who can decide to heal and the extent to which you allow yourself to heal. I say that as a survivor of the unimaginable. I say that as someone who has many peers and even siblings who have chosen not to heal. I say that as someone who has many peers who are no longer alive. I say that as someone who has overcome things people cannot even imagine. And I still say that healing is a choice. That means it's your responsibility. That also means it's a process. So there's a few things, and this is like a whole 3-hour discussion I could do, but let me try to summarize it. If you'd like, I can do a whole discussion just about healing from this type of trauma, because it's unlike, most therapists are not qualified to tackle this type of issue. And again, I say that not only from my experience, but from many, many survivors I've worked with and who therapists look up and they're like, I don't know how to help you. Bless their hearts. There's a very different tier of unimaginable childhood trauma that I hope most people can't relate to, but unfortunately, many people can. So, that I hope most people can't relate to, but unfortunately, many people can. So, it's complicated, as you can imagine. Sorry, I was just declining a war battle, whatever it is. Okay, let's start here. A big part of overcoming and healing is not only, number one, the decision to heal. You as an adult, you as who you are today, you have to be open. You have to see the potential. Do you see that it's possible, that you could get better? Whether that's physically, mentally, spiritually, do you see hope? If you are open to hope, let's start there. Because if you're not, then it's just going to be a vicious cycle. So first thing, you have to make the decision to heal. That doesn't mean that's the finish line. That means you start on that path. The other thing is that here's a message I want to give to anybody who can relate. The finish line, that means you start on that path. The other thing is that here's a message I want to give to anybody who can relate. you have to realize it was not your fault. You as a child did nothing wrong, but you also could not have avoided that. There's nothing you could have done differently to have avoided that bad guy doing that bad thing. That weak, pathetic coward had their own issues, and they were trying to seek empowerment by overpowering a vulnerable child. That weak, pathetic coward, again, had lots of issues, but a big part of healing is recognizing that that's not your shame, that you do not have to carry that guilt or that ick, that does not define you. The next step, because I'm not here to tell you to forgive and forget, and guess what you'd like. I'm not here to tell you to forgive and forget. I'm here to tell you the result you want to achieve with forgiveness is release, is to not hold on to those toxic, terrible things that can eat you up on the inside. Again, I'm really summarizing this whole very profound talk that I could take a long time to unpack. Release means not my guilt, not my shame, not my burden. I do not have to carry that throughout my life. That means you are free of that ick, that shame. I'm talking to people who can relate. I'm talking to people who don't know how to help a loved one who's been through this type of trauma. I'm letting you guys know that if you can't relate, bless your heart. I'm very happy to hear that. Also, if you're dealing with someone in your life, a family member or someone, bless your heart, but the way you want them to heal might not be the way that's someone. Bless your heart, but the way you want them to heal might not be the way that's helpful for them to heal. Now let's talk about something real quick based on the Bible, just for all the people who base their beliefs on that, because again, born and raised in a religious cult, I can quote the Bible to you. What's interesting to me, because a lot of well-meaning Christians will be like, yeah, forgive and forget, something, but okay, so first of all, Jesus said millstone, not when it comes to offending a child. He said millstone. He went right there 3 times in the Bible, but also in a different part of the Bible, when I think it was Peter asked him, Lord, how many times should I forgive my neighbor? He had a mathematical equation for that. He did not say to infinity and beyond. He did not say forever. He said, what was it, Bon? How many times should you forgive your neighbor? 70 times? I'd love to find who knows the Bible better than me. 70 times 7, which is 400 and something. So the point is that there's a mathematical equation with a cutoff date. So let's go based on the Bible. I can forgive my mother for the 400 and whatever, do the math for me, 400 and whatever days that she carried me and birthed me. And then there's a cutoff date. And then, according to Jesus, right, you've done your part. I'm just kind of being funny, but it's also, you know, if you're biblically based faith, that's what Jesus said. I like the millstone thing better, but also the point of forgiveness is to not hold on to that toxicity, to not let it eat you up on the inside. And I'm with that because look, you've already suffered. Why would you choose to continue suffering and keeping that with you? The mind is also such an interesting thing. I've done a lot of research about trauma and all these types of things. Trauma, recovery, etc. I've interviewed all these top experts, and by the way, they're fascinated with my brain and the way that I've rewired it. And it's hard to say this to people who can't relate, but made peace with it. Because here's the thing, for the things that we can't unsee, right? I'm talking also to, let's say, combat veterans that have seen the unimaginable. We can't forget, right? And it's not a forgive situation. So for these types of like level 10 extreme trauma, it's not a forgive and forget situation. And you don't want to keep those memories in the forefront of your brain. Here's how, oversimplified, here's how it works. There's different parts of your brain centers. And when you keep it in the forefront of your brain, in other words, when you keep being reminded of it, when it's haunting your dreams, it's in a certain place that bothers you and reminds you of it more often. Now then, what if, this is a whole thing I'm trying to summarize, but I need like an hour. Okay, release means process to this, and if you choose to release that, you're not holding on to it. Oversimplified, it actually moves that memory to a different compartment in your brain where it's essentially placed into long-term storage. Again, we wish we could forget, but for these memories, we can put them into long-term storage. What we can do is disassociate the trauma from the memory. This gets pretty intrinsic, so I don't know if simplifying it is going to do it justice, but I want people to understand that healing is a choice, that healing is possible, and that there's not a finish line to healing, But healing also needs to be defined for you personally. So you need to know what outcome you're after. And by the way, it could be as simple as peace and joy. That's what it is for me. What crazy lives, right? But when we're talking about healing from the unimaginable, it's not a forgive and forget situation, but what does that mean? That means I allow it zero bandwidth in my space. That means it's not allowed to haunt my dreams or affect my mood or my relationships or the things I do with my life. That means it's not going to go away. We can't undo the past, but we can absolutely decide that it's not going to affect us today, that we've suffered enough and we don't have to keep that with us today, that we are not who we are because of this thing that happened to me a long time ago. Yes, that did sculpt us into the badass person that we are today that can withstand anything, but we're not a victim to that type of trauma, right? Trauma, once again oversimplified, it's the way your brain perceives a situation. So a bad thing happened. Like child harm, using soft words for this platform, objectively bad, okay? It's not like sometimes, no, objectively bad, never okay. Now then, that happened, and I can decide to heal. Just because that happened does not mean I'm broken or victimized or whatever forever. Yes, a terrible thing happened to me for the first 20 years of my life. And now I'm a badass who rescues children, who works with other nonprofits, who empowers local and federal law enforcement to bring down bad guys, who enjoys exposing cults and nonprofits that are corrupt and things that most people are afraid of, and who's unafraid to be questioned, who's unafraid to challenge darkness because I'm not afraid of it, because darkness is a weak, pathetic coward. So